Let's talk about the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Now, these weren't just buildings, you know? They were these audacious declarations built on a scale that was almost unbelievable. We're talking about creators who pushed engineering and art to heights that honestly still blow our minds thousands of years later.
And really, that's the whole point, isn't it? The goal wasn't just to build something big. No, it was to create something so incredible, so out there, that people down the line would look at it and seriously question if it was even real. They were designed to inspire absolute awe, maybe even a little bit of disbelief.
So that's the big question for us today. How in the world did they pull it off? I mean, think about it. No modern machinery, no computers, not even steel frames. So how did these ancient visionaries turn what seemed like impossible dreams into actual stone, marble, and bronze? Let's kick things off with the one we can still go and see.
All right, so we're starting our journey with the only wonder we can still see with our own eyes. It's actually the oldest one on the list and, kind of crazily, the only one left standing. This is our one real, tangible link to this incredible age of ambition.
Just one. Seriously, that's all that's left of the original 7. And that makes the Great Pyramid more than just a wonder. It's like a unique witness to millennia of human history.
Okay, first things first. Let's just bust a classic Hollywood myth right now. You know that image of 100,000 slaves being whipped while they build? It makes for a great movie, but it's just wrong. The actual evidence points to a skilled workforce, maybe 20,000 or so conscripted laborers. And get this, it was considered a form of national service. These workers were so valued they even got medical care. So this was a project built from a shared national belief, not from brutality.
And wow, the results just speak for themselves. For almost 4,000 years, nothing built by humans was taller. But honestly, it's the precision that's really going to bake your noodle. Using just basic tools, we're talking geometry and rope, they created this nearly perfect square base covering 13 acres, with each side accurate to within inches. That is just staggering.
Okay, so we've seen the sole survivor. Now let's turn to the wonders that have been lost to time. We're going to look at a couple of structures that threw up these seemingly impossible engineering problems for their builders, forcing them to get really creative on the spot.
All right, first up, the Temple of Artemis. Try to picture this, a whole forest of giant marble columns. This thing was the largest temple of its kind ever even attempted, a real testament to the wealth of the city of Ephesus. But as you can imagine, building on this kind of scale created a very specific and very heavy problem. And here's that problem. Imagine you've managed to quarry and drag this massive marble lintel, right? It weighs as much as a modern truck. Now, you have to lower it perfectly onto 2 columns, 60 feet up in the air. One tiny mistake, and the whole thing comes crashing down. So, what do?
Well, you invent an incredibly simple, totally low-tech, and absolutely brilliant solution. The architect, a guy named Chrysophron, had his workers build a huge mound of sandbags right up to the top of the columns. They hoisted the 40-ton block onto the sandbags, and then, and this is the genius part, they just carefully started letting the sand out. The stone gently, perfectly lowered itself right into place. I mean, come on. This perfectly shows the genius of ancient engineering, using simple principles to solve massive problems.
All right, next up, the Pharaohs of Alexandria. Long before steel frames, long before elevators, the ancients built a skyscraper. Standing over 400 feet tall, it wasn't just some symbol of power for the city of Alexandria. No, it served a vital, practical purpose. Its light could be seen 50 miles out to sea, guiding ships safely into one of the busiest harbors in the ancient world.
So now, let's shift gears from pure engineering to just artistic grandeur. These next 2 wonders were famous not just for their size, but for the breathtaking skill it took to create these colossal sculptures that honestly look like they were alive.
Okay, the statue of Zeus. This was a masterpiece, made using a technique called chrysolanthropine, which is a fancy way of saying it was made of gold and ivory, all laid over a wooden frame. But here's the puzzle. How do you get flat sheets of ivory to look like flowing, rippling muscle? Well, the sculptor, Phidias, had a secret. He figured out he could soften the ivory in vinegar, which let him mold it perfectly before it hardened again. Genius.
And just to give you a sense of how massive this thing was, let's compare it to something you might know. The statue of Lincoln inside the Lincoln Memorial, that's an imposing 19 feet tall. Well, Phidias's Zeus was 45 feet tall, more than double the height, and it was crafted from the most precious materials on Earth.
Ancient writers said that when you walked into the temple, the sheer scale and the brilliance of it all was just a shock to the system.
Just as ambitious was the Colossus of Rhodes. So the story goes, after successfully defending their island from this massive invasion, the people of Rhodes wanted to build a monument to their victory and to their patron god Helios. The result? A 120-foot-tall bronze giant, a shining symbol of freedom, standing guard over their harbor.
So here's a question. Why did the Colossus only stand for 56 years before an earthquake knocked it down? The answer is all in its structure. It was a hollow bronze shell that had to support its own immense weight. Now fast forward 2,000 years. When Gustave Eiffel was designing the Statue of Liberty, he learned from this mistake. Liberty's thin copper skin carries no weight at all. Instead, it hangs on this brilliant internal iron skeleton, a backbone that allows it to flex and endure. It's a really key engineering lesson written right there across history.
Okay, on to our final two wonders. And these are the ones that are wrapped in as much mystery and legend as they are in historical fact. One was a tribute to a king's massive ego, and the other, well, it might not have existed at all.
So first we have the tomb of King Mausoleus. This was a regional king who was so obsessed with his own grandeur that he started planning this tomb on an unprecedented scale. But what's really fascinating is that after he died, his sister wife, Queen Artemisia, who was a formidable ruler and general in her own right, she took over and made sure the project got finished. The result was so spectacular that it actually gave us the word we still use for any grand tomb today, a mausoleum.
And that brings us to the most enigmatic, the most mysterious of all the wonders. The idea of a lush terraced garden just rising out of a desert plain, it's incredibly romantic. But is it true? Were the Hanging Gardens of Babylon a real place, or are they just a beautiful story?
Okay, so here's the thing. The evidence is pretty shaky. A major red flag is that the Greek historian Herodotus, who wrote a ton about the city of Babylon, never once mentions these spectacular gardens. That's a huge omission. Then you add the immense engineering challenge. I mean, building in a land with no stone and trying to figure out how to water a mountain of plants in the desert. It all leads to this really compelling theory. The legend might just be a case of mistaken identity, a confused story about some incredible palace gardens that weren't in Babylon at all, but in the rival city of Nineveh.
So after exploring all these incredible achievements, what's the big takeaway? What is the lasting impact of these ancient dreamers? Well, it turns out their legacy is all around us. Seriously, their legacy is everywhere. We see the crazy ambition of the pharaohs in our modern skyscrapers. We see the design of the mausoleum in government buildings all over the world, from DC to Melbourne. Those perfect proportions of the Great Pyramid, they're echoed in the glass pyramid at the Louvre. And of course, the dream of the Colossus absolutely lives on in the Statue of Liberty. These weren't dead ends. They were the foundations that we're still building on today.
And this really gets to the heart of it all. The Seven Wonders, they were part of an age of incredible optimism. They were an attempt to push technology to its absolute limit, to go further than anyone had ever gone before.
Which kind of leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it? Back in an ancient world with a much smaller known map, they could agree on 7 supreme achievements. But in our sprawling, globalized, hyper-connected world today, what would our wonders even be? The International Space Station, the Internet, and could we ever possibly agree on just 7? It really makes you think about what we, today, choose to celebrate as the very best of us. Thanks for joining me.